What's going on, Troll Maniacs? Welcome back to telesplashgaming, your favorite trollster, Chris, right here with you, and I'm going back to my trolling roots. Today is another video in my latest series, Games You Thought, and today it's games you thought were good, but they actually suck now. That doesn't mean these games weren't amazing when they came out, but going back and reliving that nostalgia can sometimes be just that, a memory that should be left in the past. Today, I've got 8 games or so that I think were great, but now you go back and play them and go, not worth your time. Some of my favorite games of all time are on here. Let's do it. Now, I'm not here to make fun of your favorite game, alright? Let's just take it easy before you guys get crazy in the comments. We know it's true, and I could pick every game in the 3D era from the PS1 and the N64 days to be on here because we know that first entry into 3D graphics was a rough way. But hey, somebody had to start it, and I'm glad they did. But starting off, we're going with one of my favorite dungeon crawlers of all time, a classic from Blizzard. It's Diablo. Diablo was mind-blowing when it came out. The sequel was even better, and then Diablo 3 was kind of a turd that just wouldn't flush down the toilet. But Diablo 2 was incredible. But we're going back to Diablo 1. I played this game when it came out. I had dial-up internet. I called my buddy's landline, he answered it with his computer, and we had some online gaming goodness. The point is, at the time, it was unlike anything I'd ever played before. I literally was sitting there just, oh my gosh, this is amazing, I've never played a game like Diablo, because I hadn't been into any of the other D&D games, I hadn't been into anything that was isometric up to that point. Diablo was my first real foray into PC gaming. I was a Nintendo, an SNES kid. Diablo was amazing when I played it. But recently I went back to try it out. My goodness, you can't run in the game. First off, you're just walking, light as a feather, stiff as a board, throughout the entire game. The gameplay is actually not terrible, but compared to what is in today's isometric dungeon crawlers, the Dark Alliances years later made it better. The Diablo 2, Diablo 3 sequel, even though I didn't like that game, just did everything better. And obviously, you expect a game to get better as, the sequels come out. That's not always the case. But in reality, Diablo 1, for as amazing as it was, as one of the greatest games of all time, and one of my personal favorite games, it really sucks. It's amazing at the time the kind of patience we had as gamers to deal with games like this. Because it was good then, it's bad now, and the only way you should play it is if you want to go back and see where the roots started. So Diablo 1, first game up, was good, now it sucks. Next up, okay, I said I wouldn't tear into all 3D games, but there are a couple that are known as timeless classics, all-time greats that get all the praise, but in all reality, we put the windshield wipers on those beer goggles, clear it out, and you go back and play it, and you go, okay, maybe, just maybe these games, as good as they were, they're not a good representation of what they're all about today. And that's going with GoldenEye on the Nintendo 64. Now, I have a full N64 set minus 3 games. I know my N64 games, and GoldenEye is the reason that I still play games inverted to this day. Thank you, GoldenEye, for that. But with that being said, there was no dual analog sticks. You had one analog stick, and your C buttons are what made you strafe around. At the time, it was great. The 4-player co-op was amazing. But really going back to show anybody who hasn't played this game when it came out what it was all about now, they're not going to get it. They're going to laugh you out of the room. And they should. The game's graphics, I don't care about that. It's the game's actual controls that are trash. When you play this, you're going, how did anybody ever play an FPS game? Now, I could have done Duke Nukem, I could have put Doom, but GoldenEye was really the big one that everybody talks about, especially when they talk about games you've got to have on the N64. You don't need to have GoldenEye if you own an N64 and want to play some good games. GoldenEye is not great anymore. It laid the groundwork for what FPSs were all about at the time, but there's a reason. You put that brick down, you lay it, and you move on. And that's where we're at with GoldenEye. So, first game up, Diablo. Second game, a classic on the N64, GoldenEye. Don't go back and play it. It's not worth it. I'm going to move into an arcade. I'm going to give the 3D games a break for a second, and I'm going to move into the arcade classic. How about Rampage? Rampage was awesome. Who didn't want to be King Kong, climb to the top of a building, smash it, take out airplanes, take out vehicles, eat people? Yeah, you could eat people. It was really cool. But I recently went back and played it on my arcade cabinet, and after about, I don't know, 69 seconds, I was bored out of my mind. I can't believe how repetitive that game really is. And it wasn't just a one-off. I mean, there was Rampage on the arcade. There was multiple Rampages on the Nintendo systems. Many consoles had Rampage games, and they're not bad, even though they're on this list. But these were games that were like defining. You know, they were arcade defining games. You had to play Rampage. And frankly, if it was a quarter collector like an arcade, I could see where it'd be fun for 10 minutes. But I remember playing on my Game Boy with my cousin, linking him up in the back of the bus and playing Rampage on the way to an air show with my grandparents. And we had a blast. I can't believe, after going back and playing, how we did 2 hours of linked Game Boy where you just go from screen to screen, bashing buildings, eating people, smashing cars, and moving on. That's it. Again, times have changed, but Rampage is a game that was good, but it sucks now. Alright, I gave the 3D stuff a break for a second, but I'm moving into another classic game that is going to get some people's blood boiling. And you know what? I love it. We're moving on to the original Tomb Raider. Okay, yeah, we know the 3D games aren't fantastic, but we're talking really, really, really bad 3D. If you look at Lara Croft in the first Tomb Raider game, she looks like she belongs in a modern Lego game. She's so polygonal. And not just the graphics, okay? I don't need to beat up the graphics. I can beat up every PS1 and N64 game. But the gameplay at the time, which seemed just amazing, incredible, just, oh my gosh, this is the next gen stuff, and it was, now feels clunky, slow, and awkward. Really, believe me. Go put in Tomb Raider, the original, and just see how far controls have gone over the last 30, 20 years. Insane. This game is a timeless classic, I guess. But if you want to play it now, very few people will put this in and go, wow, this is a fun game. It's really weird too. It's so quiet. Games are so full now, and this one just isn't. It's very unique. Tomb Raider has a place on an all-time greats list, but it was good then, and it freaking sucks now. Another game that was a genre-defining game on the PlayStation 2 and the Xbox, Grand Theft Auto 3. I loved Grand Theft Auto 3. I walked 2 miles to my local Walmart to buy this game, and then 2 miles back, and I played it to completion. If there was a trophy for Platinum, I would have gotten it in this game. I loved it. Then the sequel came out, Vice City, San Andreas. It's still an amazing franchise, but what you don't realize is that every little iteration of games, updates, patches adds so much to a game. When you go back and play Grand Theft Auto 3, it feels empty. The controls that seemed kind of crisp at the time now feel sluggish. It's just not that fun. It really isn't. If you've played any GTA game recently, going back and trying to relive the glory days of the original first GTA game in 3D is a rough go. It's not good. Again, most of these games at one time were known as 10 out of 10s, amazing games, must plays. Now, they're must leave on the shelf, collect some dust, and show your friends something else. There's many games that hold up, but Grand Theft Auto 3, graphically, gameplay-wise, it just doesn't quite do it the way that it originally did. And hey, no harm, no foul. I know you guys are gonna go ahead and just stab me in the comments, but so I brought out the big guns for you guys today. These shoulders, they can carry that load, so bring on the hate. Going back to another classic arcade game that ate more quarters than I probably had my life savings at the time, and that's Altered Beast, also on the Genesis. Altered Beast is a classic side-scrolling beat-em-up that dominated the 80s and 90s. Side-scrollers literally where you spent your money. Every game was a side-scroller for the most part. But Altered Beast just had this place in my mind. I remember going to a cabin, going camping, and playing this, and getting the power-ups, and you morphed into this wolf, obviously, this beast, and then you had multiple different power-ups depending on the level. And I loved it. I went back and played it a few years ago on my arcade cabinet, and, well, it sucks, okay? Let's just be honest. It's really sluggish controls. It's not that fun. It's very repetitive. It's honestly kind of a boring game. And that's not even in relation to like modern games. I'm saying I can't believe that this game, even at the time, was considered so amazing. And if it wasn't for the power-ups, it would have just been a basic side-scrolling beat 'em up that nobody would have cared about. But the power-ups are what made it, and that's what everybody remembers. But in all reality, Altered Beast is not a really, really great game. I'm not even sure it was great at the time, but hey, even I thought it was good, so that's why it made the list today. It's not good anymore, but try it out. Don't take my word for everything, even though it's right. Pull your daggers out, folks, because I can feel the old stabs in the back coming. This is going to kill a lot of people. It hurts my heart. It hurts this troll heart so bad. That's Final Fantasy VII. And I said I wasn't going to beat up a bunch of these early 3D games because it'd be way too easy. But Final Fantasy VII at the time was a cultural phenomenon. I'm not kidding. If you weren't around to experience it, it is hard to explain the significance this had on JRPGs, especially over here in America. We had Final Fantasies before, but they were in 2D. This 3D version was what everybody was talking about. But go back and play it now, it's like, yeah, right. I went back and played Final Fantasy VIII on my Switch. I had a great time doing it. Final Fantasy IX, 12, all the other games hold up that are in 3D. This is the only 3D Final Fantasy that is rough. It is the one game where I'd say, do not show someone Final Fantasy VII unless they've played some other games first, because this is not going to get them into it. Even Final Fantasy V, Final Fantasy VI hold up on the 2D consoles. And again, I don't want to beat it up for its graphics, but just everything about this game is so dated, which is exactly why we got the remake, because it's one of the most loved and hated games in the entire franchise. But since people love this so much, and there's been movies, there's been books, there's been video, all sorts of crap on Final Fantasy VII spin-offs, they decided to remake it, and thank God they did, because now people can actually experience it, even though it's not going to give you that same feels that this game did. When I played this game on the PS1, it was incredible. But going back now, it sucks. The story's good, but playing through it is a slog. One more to round out the list and make it a nice even 8. And that's Metroid on the NES. So many NES and Super NES and Genesis games actually hold up so well. So many classics that are still so fun to play. Metroid really isn't one of them. Now, first off, you gotta hear me out. I swear the corridors just had different palette changes, so you're getting lost. There was no map. That's what we talk about when we say NES hard. It's not always that it's so difficult to play as much as it is you just get lost. Metroid was not the greatest when it came to controls going back to it. The corridors, besides palette swapping the colors, you don't know where you're going, and you basically have to go online to find a map. How about this? When you play Metroid, I believe the max health is 100, and then you can get some tanks and get more, but when you die, you only get 30 health. So you spend 15 minutes going back just to get your health up, and then if you die again, you do it again. It's one of the most repetitive and boring things that you just did in gaming, because that's how it was then. But going back now to play the original Metroid, if you don't have any patience, yeah, call yourself a cab and get the heck out of here, because it is legit just hair pulling. 30 health, and then you gotta just grind for health, and then you can continue your journey. If you can remember where you're going. Because again, there's no map. And again, I don't always say that you need a map to make everything better, but without save states and online maps, skip this freaking game. Go to Super Metroid. Much better. That's what most people talk about. But Metroid was a great game. Or you thought it was, and now it sucks. Alright gamers, there you got it. 8 games that are probably going to drive you crazy. They're going to say, Chris, these games don't hold up because they're old. You can't make fun of a game because it's in 3D. It has a place in history. Yeah, I know, okay? But I can do what I want here. That's what I'm saying. And these games to me, as great and timeless as they may have been, aren't actually timeless. They suck now, alright? It's the truth. And I love these games. I love Diablo. I love Final Fantasy VII. One of my favorites. But I can't show my kids these games. They'd laugh me out of the freaking house. My son will say he's the man of the house if I show him these games, and that's not going to happen. Alright, let me know in the comments below, what other games you believe that everybody loved, but they just aren't good anymore. They're just not worth playing, even though they might be 10 out of 10s when they came out. Thanks for hanging out. Thanks for watching. Keep trolling. Keep rolling. See you next week.